A woman wrote, these classes on this Maimer gave me tremendous clarity and inspiration. I am binge listening. Please keep it going. I was in a very, very difficult place. Raped by a father hundreds and hundreds of times is something I assume most people will not even understand or even believe. So I decided to end it all. And I mean end it all on a physical level. I am shattered into thousands of pieces and I simply could not live any longer. I want to tell you what happened with these recent classes. They gave me a burst of energy. I feel alive. I feel there's purpose to it all. I feel there's meaning. I feel there's depth. This gave me back my power. You said yesterday that you're the Meshuggah who speaks about everything people don't like to be spoken about. So I'm going to ask you, please be that Meshuggah person. Please be that real rabbi and talk about the difficult, uncomfortable, unappealing topics.
TheYeshiva.net.
Okay, today's class is dedicated by Reb Shaya and Sterke Boimelgreen. Thank you very, very much. Very, very appreciative for all. Bracha v'atzlacha ad bli dai, with much happiness, abundance, nachas, and all goodness, with good spirits. I got quite a few emails about what we're learning, but I wanted to read to you a few messages I received, in continuation to yesterday's class, because I think I think it could teach us all a lot. It taught me a lot. Okay, so this is an email from a person. This is what he wrote. It was a long letter. I'm just reading a few lines. I must tell you that I'm listening to the shiurim on Derech Mitzvosecha, the Maimer about the Kohen who was blemished not serving in the Bais HaMikdash. The teachings were truly life-changing in so many ways. I have been in a rut for years because a certain experience, certain issue that I feel plagued with. And this message here of this Maimer instilled a new hope in my heart. It was so eye-opening for me, especially the idea that there's no such a thing that you're struggling and a person is just a nebach, a victim, lost and defiled and contaminated. They were sent on a mission to destroy the side of impurity and reveal the infinity and the Ein Sof within that space. I know my struggle won't go away in a second, but it did give me hope regarding my specific struggle. I feel ready to start living again. I need to know the practical steps to take, but you should know that these classes saved my soul, mamish. A woman wrote, these classes on this Maimer gave me tremendous clarity and inspiration. You hit on the nail. Number one, my soul choosing this journey and experiencing the darkness in such a powerful way that a regular brain can't grasp. My ability to kill and disentangle myself from these clippers. It does take an enormous amount of energy, and I'm doing it. The fact that it only touches the outer layer of the soul and doesn't define my being is life-changing. These are stunning words of healing. I listened over and over again to the class. I can't get enough of it because it's a tremendous source of strength. But let me clarify. Are you saying, or is this Maimer saying, that my soul chose to be exposed to this horrific darkness, being raped by my father hundreds of times? And are you telling me that by doing this hard work of healing, I'm actually rectifying the darkness in the entire world? There's an expression in English called binging, people who are addicted to food. Well, let me tell you about these classes. I am binge listening. Please keep it going. This is saving lives. I can speak only for myself, but I was in a very, very difficult place. raped by a father hundreds and hundreds of times, is something I assume most people will not even understand or even believe. I couldn't fight this tumah anymore. I felt depleted. I couldn't take it any longer. The pain is unbearable. I was in a place and I decided to end it all. And I mean end it all on a physical level. To the outside world, I'm a super functional mother, wife, and teacher. Nobody would imagine the brokenness that lives inside my heart. I am shattered into thousands of pieces and I simply could not live any longer. I want to tell you what happened with these recent classes. They gave me a burst of energy. I feel alive. I feel there's purpose to it all. I feel there's meaning. I feel there's depth. This gave me back my power. You said yesterday that you're the Meshuggah who speaks about everything people don't like to be spoken about. So I'm going to ask you, please be that Meshuggah person. Please be that real rabbi and talk about the difficult, uncomfortable, unappealing topics. This was her email. And then somebody else wrote me just last night, late. I saw it like close to the middle of the night. I'm listening online. This maimah is fire. I wanted to let you know that I'm present. My emotions are going wild. You took me back in time to start understanding that all my experiences, the good and the bad and the ugly, is something that has taken me to the present. And because of this, I can start to understand and face everything head on, most of the time. Even my mistakes are actually going to bring me into a deeper spiritual place of transcendence, into a deeper Gan Eden, lower and higher. This is so healing and so transformative. I'm reading this to you because I think it describes to us a little bit of what quite a significant amount of people go through. And that's why I said yesterday that when you see all of this, you realize, how important it is to be able to give ourselves and people a voice, to be able to address the authentic situation of what's happening in people's hearts and souls, and not just sweet-coat it and cause people who are suffering so much to repress it. And that's really the whole theme of what we're learning here. So now we come back to the beginning of the whole discussion. If you remember, it all started off with a statement from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai in the Zohar, Parshas Vayeshev. That's where he quotes the Sukum, the verses of Parshas Emer, that a Kohen who suffers from certain disabilities and certain physical blemishes, a Balmum, can't go into the sanctuary, to the Heichal, and can't do the Avodah by the Mizbeach, can't do the Avodah, even though he can eat from all the karbonas, even those karbonas that are called Kodesh Kadashim, which bring atonement. He could eat like any other Kohen. The Tzemach Tzedek has, there's a contradiction here, because if for some reason he can't atone, he can't do the service to atone, but he could eat, which is part of the atonement. Kohenim oichelim ubaylim mischaprim. The Kohenim eat and the owners receive atonement. And how do you even understand this whole idea? If he physically can't do the avodah, he can't stand, okay. But if he physically could, are we discriminating against handicapped people? We're discriminating against people with disabilities. It's the Kohen's fault. What if he was born with it? Or there was an accident? Or there's an illness, there's a disease? It's so difficult. So for this, he quoted a Zohar in Parshas Vayeshev. And now he's going to come after this whole long explanation about the moon and the blemish of the moon and Malchus and Klippa. So now he goes back to the Zohar. I just want to remind you the words of the Zohar, because the words of the Zohar are very Kabbalistic and mystical and cryptic. The Zohar is the foundational book of Kabbalah, so it's written in a very mystical way, filled with riddles and enigmatic statements that need to be deciphered and demythologized and brought down. So I just want to remind you the words which we learned in the beginning, and then we'll see here how he comes to explain it in the Derech of Chabad Chassidus, to explain it with Chachma, Bina, Das, so that it could be comprehended and internalized at least to some degree. So Reb Shimon said, I'm not going to read everything in Aramaic, we'll go to it, I'm just reminding you. Reb Shimon spoke about the fact that this certain Kohenim cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash by the altar, or can't go into the Heichel, into the inner sanctuary. And he said, Tachazi, come and see. And I'm quoting it with translation to English, just what it says in Zohar without any explanation, but now we'll be able to go back to what it means. When the river, that river, began to flow, it brought out with it all of the souls. And the souls became impregnated into femininity, into nukva, into the woman. And all the souls existed inside the sacred source, Lagav, inside Hashem's sacred source. They existed, what he calls Bekurta de Lagav, inside, Gav is inside, Kurta's treasure, inside the divine treasure. Within the Paraychas, behind the curtain in the Holy of Holies. And all these souls were Besiter Kurta, which means in a designated place within the divine treasure, not scattered, and therefore no access to any no impurity had access to it. However, when the moon became blemished as a result of the influence of the toxicity of the snake, so all the souls that come out at that moment when the moon is blemished, they are pure and they are holy. But since they came out during the time of the blemish, so wherever these souls end up, they experience brokenness, they experience pain, they experience anguish. And yet these are the people that God has a special relationship to because they were broken through the blemish of the Shechina itself. They were broken like the Shechina. They were broken like the moon. They are therefore a reflection of the divine. Kegavna de la'ela. They are a reflection of the divine. And you have to remember that only the body could be blemished. Their inner soul, the neshmasa lagav, remains exactly like the divine. It reflects each other. And thus they are the ones who will mostly dance and celebrate the joy of the moon. This is the statement of Reb Shimon ben Yochai that was quoted in the beginning of this Maimer. And therefore he says, don't think that this pain has to do with sins, that the person caused this pain, that these are lav minei dahu barnash. This doesn't come from the person's doing. You say all pain, it's because you sinned, or your father sinned, your mother sinned, your baba sinned. No. He says this is actually called Yisurim Shal Ahava, which means it's a mission that this soul undertook because of its love. It's a whole different way of understanding much of the pain that people go through, that souls go through. This is, He's talking about both. He's speaking about physical. He's also speaking about physical blemishes. And then he speaks also about spiritual pain. For example, he speaks about Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who's speaking about this, and his friends, who were in exile and would go from place to place, and they did not have an easy life. He says they're part of this. So it's all different types of journeys. It could be physical, it could be emotional, mental, spiritual. In Gemara and Brachas, there's an argument if yesh yisurim b'loy oven or ein yisurim b'loy oven. Right? Is there pain that's always connected to sin or not? It's a big argument there. And in many, many Mefarshim, it says, no, not necessarily. Here, Reb Shimon ben Yochai says clearly there's different types. It's not always because the person needs cleansing and forgiveness and they did something wrong. Okay, this is the quote from the Zohar. Now, obviously, it's very mystical words, spiritual words. So on this, the Maimer started to explain the whole idea that the moon represents the element of the Shechina, which is called Malchus. And Malchus was diminished. And it goes on a journey into Bri, Yitzira, Asiya, in order to accomplish, to vivify all the worlds. And there it does Birur Rishon and Birur Sheni. He spoke about the higher Birur of Chacham and the lower Birur of Malchus. And the lower Birur has to do with the Nitzutzes, elevating all the sparks. This was the whole Arichas. And then he discussed the war that's involved. The tremendous war, and how Klippa needs to feed off Kedusha. And the war could be extremely, extremely bloody and difficult from a spiritual perspective. Why? Because this is its only form of oxygen. Unholiness lives only from holiness, and therefore will do anything to remain entangled with goodness, with holiness, because without that, I'm laughing. It's just, it shows how tragic it is, because the Klippa needs me. And I think I'm the Klippa. You understand? That's how it gets me. The best way to keep somebody in your clutches is when that person thinks he's you. You know, like codependence. If I feel I can't live without you, right? So I need you so much, so I keep you. And the paradox is not only don't I need you, you can't live without me. But that's what happens. This impurity takes over. And it makes the person think that not only they need it, this is who they are, you know? So this is wonderful. So the disentanglement is a very, very, it's a painful process. And he says the Klippa will fight till its last breath, literally, because this is going to be its last breath. It knows that this is going to be its last breath, and it's not going to let it happen. And that's where you have to be careful. You have to be careful because at such a moment, you know, you're winning the war, and when you win the war, you could lose the war. You know, if you close your eyes, you know, you're having an arm wrestle with somebody, and you're almost done. But that's the moment, you know, when the other person is almost down. What do? They muster all their last strength, right? They muster all their last strength. That's when they do it because they're losing. It says in one of the Maimarim why in the middle of Shemona Esrei sometimes you have the worst machshava zaras. Other times you're fine. After middle of Shemona Esrei, and you thought it was a good day. You were having kavanah, you were having machshava, you were trying to tune, and suddenly, boom! It's like, oh my God, what I'm thinking about. You don't even realize, right? So it could be very discouraging. So it says in Tanya in chapter 28, koyach, koyach, the other way around. It actually could mean that it was a good davening. It means it was a good davening. He says, you see, when two people are wrestling, and you almost defeated the other, that's when they try to make a comeback because they're being defeated. They're not being defeated, they could relax. They don't have to fight so hard. But when you see that you're losing, that's when you put up a fight. So sometimes the depth of the resistance is a sign of success. You're doing well. So that's what he says, how Klippa works. And then from this he went on to the idea how in a war we often give up, we surrender some territory. We surrender some troops. There's casualties only to bring the enemy out of its rabbit holes, of its trenches, of its caves, of its hiding places, so that you can completely destroy it. And this was all a metaphor for the journey of many a soul. And he gave the example of Yehuda and Tamar, and he gave the example of Eliyahu Hanavi sacrificing in Hara Carmel, the Karbonis, and he gave the example of Shabbos or Yom Kippur being overridden for particular reasons. These were all examples for this in Torah and history and halacha, etc., but similar themes. So what was the ultimate summation? Now he's going to go back to the Zohar and conclude the whole process. So what was the ultimate summation? That when people experience journeys in life that are painful, there's always three main points to remember. It's easier said than done in terms of internalization. The first thing the person has to remember is that the soul remains divine, always. So ultimately, who went through this experience? Who's going through this experience? Hashem himself. It's the Ein Sof. The soul is a chelek Eloka mimal. So it's infinite consciousness going through a finite experience and sometimes a very dark journey. Gam ki yelech begeit salmovis lo yirara ki ate imadi. That's number one. In Kabbalistic Hasidic language, it's called Malchus. This is the quality of Malchus, the Shechina, Golus HaShechina, the exile of the Shechina. The same Rashbi in Gemara, this is in Zohar, Vayeshev. In Gemara Megillah, Rashbi says, Kol Chavivin Yisrael, Kol Makom Shagolu Yisrael, Shechina Iman. Wherever Yisrael went, the Shechina is with them, at the end of Maseches Megillah. And he goes through the examples of the exiles that the Jews went through. Whether it's Babylonia, whether it's Persia, Greece, etc. Edom, Rome. He knew about Rome. He suffered. He was in a cave for 13 years because of Rome. Shechina Iman. So it's not just a concept of some spiritual, mystical idea somewhere the Shechina is there. It means that the soul is a piece of the Shekhinah. So of course the Shekhinah is there. That's number one. Number two, because of that, I don't have to be afraid of facing anything. I can go in to wherever I was sent. I don't have to disconnect. I don't have to run away. I don't have to close my eyes. I don't have to repress. If I know at the core it's infinity and the darkness is not more powerful than me, I can go there. If I am the darkness is more powerful than me, certain places I'm not going. Of course you disassociate. Of course you disconnect. Once you know that the infinite light is present here, and you're experiencing this, and you experienced it as Ein Sof, you can go everywhere. You could show up. And that means feeling the pain. It means going into that place. As he puts it, you have to enclothe yourself in the Levush HaMizbarer. I'm in a war. I can't fight the war with drones. It would be nice, but I can't. Certain battles, you could throw a missile, you could throw a grenade, and that's it. But as Israel knows very well, certain wars, you got to go from alley to alley, from house to house, blow up one cave and another cave. It's not easy. Emotionally too. I can't just stay above and say, hey, you rat, get out of here. I have to go in so he could come out, and then I can destroy. And number three, even the part of me that goes in and gets affected, it's not that I'm really damaged. It's all to destroy it. That's the third point. It's all ultimately to destroy it. As I said, the words are easier to say than the experience of it, because the experience of it is the experience of it. You could talk about war. You could write a book, The Art of War. You could be a military strategist in your house. But in reality, many situations in history, soldiers went to war with excitement. When the British and the Germans went to the First World War, they went with so much passion. They thought it's going to be a few weeks. They'll show off their skills and boom. When the bodies start coming back and the people start becoming wounded, everything changes, It's ugly, it's disgusting, it's horrific, it's dark, it's painful. I'm saying we have to be sensitive when we talk about all these things emotionally. Like what this woman writes about what what she experienced in her family. It's not anymore just a mimer that we're learning, in the morning. It's unimaginable. And I want to empathize with it. It's so important. And I'm saying this because I know she's listening now, but I'm saying it to everybody. That, you see, all when people cause pain to other people, especially to children, it's always horrific. But there was a Jewish poet. He wrote about the pogroms of Kishinev. About the pogroms of Kishinev in 1881. It was horrible. So he wrote, what did he say? The revenge for the blood of a child, even Satan did not create yet. How do you avenge for the blood of a child? When you see children dead, murdered, slain. He says, even Satan didn't create yet that type of revenge. So when you see children who are vulnerable being destroyed like that, it's a unique pain. But this is much more. The pogroms happened through murderous anti-Semitic peasants who came to kill the Jewish children. In her case, it was her father. So just think about that. My father comes into my bedroom, or wherever it is. Who am I seeing? I'm seeing somebody that I'm told to love. And I want to love. A child, by nature, wants to love mommy and tati. This is our source of attachment in life. So think what that does to a brain. So here's a person whom I love, I respect. I'm going to a school where they teach me that one of the 10 commandments is to respect your father and mother. And we all know that mitzvah is a very important mitzvah for civilization, because cultures where there was no respect for fathers and mothers did not turn out well. And we learned the story of Dama ben Esina, who didn't wake up his father, right? And he was ready to lose all the money in Kedushin. And therefore he was rewarded with a para aduma. And probably she also learned that in school, because it's a very basic Jewish teaching in any Jewish school. So your mind and your soul and your heart is telling you, here's a person I should respect and here's a person I should love. And in reality, what's happening? You're dealing with a person who's a murderer. It's a murder, literally a murder. It's the Gemara, the Apostle says, "Kashayakum ishareyur itzachai nefesh kein adavar hazeh." It's a form of murder, emotional murder, sometimes physical murder too. You see, decades later, a person still doesn't know if they want to live. Decades later. So just think what it does to the brain. The enemy is not clear. At least, I'm not minimizing other situations, but there's no identifiable enemy. So what do? So maybe it didn't happen. Or maybe there was good intentions. Or maybe this is what love looks like. Or maybe I deserve it. So besides the physical insanity and the emotional insanity, the insanity of not knowing who's right and who's wrong and who do I believe, do you know what that does to a brain, my friends? But if people don't understand this, they don't understand this. You lose your trust in who? In yourself. You can't trust any instinct. You can't trust any emotion. You can't trust anything. Because on one hand, you're standing in front of a person who's a hero. On the other hand, you know deep down that he's a monster. So what do you say? So he's not a monster. So everything I'm feeling is a joke. It's fake. Now this person grows up. They don't trust a single emotion of theirs. Nothing. They don't trust themselves. That's even if they feel. They usually can't even feel anymore. How could you start feel? It's too much to feel. You go out of your emotions. That's what I talk about, artificial intelligence. I have nothing against artificial intelligence. I love artificial intelligence as long as you don't turn people into artificial intelligence. Computers should be artificial intelligence. It's wonderful. GBT chat is wonderful. But when I'm becoming artificial intelligence because my heart was literally cut out of my system, that's a tragedy all its own. How did I get into this story? You have to remind me. I forgot my train of thought here. Anybody here is using their left brain? So therefore, no, what I was saying, so all the explanations pale in regard to the experience of it. You know, you could talk and prepare, but the experience of it is a whole different world. And that's why we need so much empathy for ourselves and for others. You have to be able to cut yourself slack. I know it's not a Jewish thing, but it's a very Jewish thing. You have to be able to cut yourself slack. This is what the whole Zohar is trying to teach. Rabbi says, you got to cut yourself slack. You have to understand that you're dealing with a big thing. You're dealing with a colossal thing. And ignoring the pain and making believe it's not painful, you're not helping anybody. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping the world. So these are the three fundamental issues. Number one, if I can go back as an adult and say, wow, this was God who went through this experience. It didn't feel that way when I was 4, but that's the truth. It was my divinity that went through this experience. Which means that at the core, I was never, ever, ever damaged, even though it doesn't feel that way. The moon that I see is damaged. In fact, the moon that I see is gone. It's invisible. It's not just damaged, it left. That's the moon I see. But there's the moon I don't see. The relationship of the moon to the sun was not damaged. What happened as a result of the diminishment of the moon is our vantage point of the moon changes in different positions. The Alter Rebbe has a maimer that the cycle of a woman reflects the moon. A woman is Malchus. Malchus is the Shechina, so her cycle reflects it. So there's part of a cycle. There's a time where you're in a diminished state, and it's normal. That's a very good question. What happens if somebody is struggling and they can't identify an event to trace it back to? You know that sometimes the most difficult experiences in life, people reduce to their subconscious memories, and they don't have a memory of it. I'm just saying, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that's a serious possibility in life. People who simply, because of the intensity of it, and the brain couldn't believe it, so the brain erases it. But all the symptoms are there. All the symptoms are there. I know of a fellow, he lives not far from here, and Kavayachal, he had a perfect life, but he had every symptom of trauma. But there was nothing. Good house and a good family, and had always what he needed, and successful. Begashmias, Brokenness, but every symptom of trauma. Couldn't connect with his spouse, couldn't connect with his children, couldn't connect with himself. Tremendous anxiety. Not long ago he discovered such horrible things. I'm not even going to say what he discovered. I don't have the kayak to say it. I'm going to get exhausted. Such horrible things. They were so horrible that his brain erased it all. Of course, he knew it all, but he knew it on a subconscious level. The soul knows everything. Nobody could shut off the neshama. Just like this, Ayin Royev Ezin Shemaz, Hashem sees and hears, your soul sees and hears everything. Right? It's the biggest mistake of all tyrants and dictators, all the Hitlers and all the Stalins and all the Paris, and they think you can kill God. What does it mean, kill God? It's what people still think today. Today they don't say kill God, they say kill the soul. You can't kill a soul. There's nothing you can do. Truth is more powerful than falsehood. And the soul has an eye, and the eye sees. What do they call the third eye? The third eye, right? It's a different eye. Hayotzer ayin halayabit. What it says in today's Shir Shel Yom. Vayomru lo yira ka lo yovin alekei Yakov. They say Hashem doesn't see. Binu boirim ba'am uchsilim masay taskilu. Hanoita oizen ala yishma. Hayotzer ayin halayabit. He built the eye, you think he can't see? He built your ear, you think he can't hear? He doesn't need an ear and an eye to see and hear. You think just because you're an abuser, he won't see and hear? The soul is the same, because the soul is a chelik elokam. My point is that that's possible. But remember, when we speak about brokenness, it's not necessary. Our dear friend Ibn Nechemia wrote me this morning, because this is a response to what you're saying. He wrote to me that he's not coming. Amazing and empowering stuff. Don't undersell the relevance to every neshama, even if its journey isn't from the worst traumas. You know, we go to one conversation because it's so horrific, but it's very true. Emotional neglect is not an identifiable trauma. The kid had food, he had clothes, he wasn't in a bomb shelter his whole life. Nobody did anything crazy, and therefore when he's suffering, he says, well, I'm the crazy one. But it's neglect. It was neglect. A kid who was not seen, who was not soothed, who did not feel safe, who did not feel secure. These are real needs, and if I never had them, it has consequences. Think about a plant that doesn't get the sunlight it needs, doesn't get the water it needs, doesn't have the soil it needs. What happens? It dries up and dies. So you look at the plant and you say, whoa, what's this chutzpah? What's this defiance? Why are you having oppositional defiance disorder? Why can't you produce beautiful leaves and a nice plant and good vegetables and fruits? And the answer is, the plant doesn't have oppositional defiance disorder. The plant just did not get its needs. A plant needs sunlight. Without sunlight, it cannot function. So everybody understands that when a plant dries up, it's not chutzpah. It's not a positional defiance disorder. It just didn't get its needs. We think children are not plants. Plants we don't suspect in having chutzpah, but children, yeah, they're horrible. Maybe a child also needs a little sunlight and he didn't get it. Maybe the child also needs a little water and he didn't get it. Maybe the child also needs some soil and some air and a comfortable place and safety and security and attachment and connection and the ability to be authentic and creative and to experience its emotions. I'm just giving a few examples of what we need. So it's not a blame game, but it's identifying a fact that this is the way God designed it. Imagine somebody says, my child doesn't have to eat. I don't have to eat, I don't have to drink, I don't have to sleep. The Gemara says if somebody makes a shvuah, that he's not going to sleep for he's not going to sleep more than 3 days, and this So he says, you give him malchus and put him to sleep. It's not possible. It's not possible. Children, there's a design of a body and of a soul. A child without attachment is missing something. It's missing something. You can't say it's not missing. And it's going to show up in the plant. So we have to be able to understand this is also a form of brokenness. And it's not about blaming and now I'm a victim. Somebody wrote a scathing email. Rabbi Jacobson, till you came around, everybody knew there's a Yetzer Hara. And now you decided it's all trauma. Huh? For thousands of years, Jews knew there was a Yetzer Hara. And now, no, yo Yetzer Hara, you're perfect, you're good, you're holy, it's all trauma. Huh? So, of course, what did I write back to him? I'm so sorry for your trauma. Just joking. Just joking. I didn't do that. I wanted to, but I didn't do that. Huh? But the truth is, it's a good question. But what's a missing piece here? Okay? The words trauma or brokenness are not here to give people a shortcut and say I don't have to deal with my Yetzer Hara. It's in order to help me deal with my Yetzer Hara. For example, if somebody has a Yetzer Hara of addiction, particular person, is married, and he's constantly betraying his wife. He's cheating on his wife. And he's a younger man. He learns Daf Yomi every day. And he learns Mesilas Yesharim. And he davens Vasikim. And he doesn't miss Mincha Ma'ariv with a minyan. And he has Shiurim. And he's a good person. He's a good person. And this is something he tried everything. And he went to therapists, and he went to doctors, and he took medication, and he went to 12 steps, and he went to here, and he went to there. He wants to, and then something happens. It's like a dibble goes in, and he doesn't, he gets into the car, and the Nachash HaKadmoni, the snake, takes over. And he regrets it. But the next week or the next day again, something happens, and he feels this uncontrollable urge. And he went to many people, and everybody said the same thing. It's a Yetzer Hara. And what do you do with the Yetzer Hara? You fight the Yetzer Hara. And that's what he's trying to do. What if he discovers, and he did discover, that somebody in his family, as a child, did horrible, horrible things to him? He was molested, and molested by more than one member in his family. He didn't know because he was a little kid, and he erased it from his memory. And suddenly he discovered that his soul was cut off at a very young age. His emotions were cut off, his safety was cut off, his attachment was cut off. Something very deep was played with him. And you know what he suddenly realizes? So the self that I know today is actually not the self that was born. The self that I know today is a post-trauma self. So suddenly he can understand where the Yetzer Hara came from. Suddenly he realizes this Yetzer Hara is not his essence. This Yetzer Hara is a survival mechanism to be able to deal with crazy, insane pain. And suddenly he realizes that there's a pre-trauma self that actually doesn't have to do this because it doesn't need it. And he could learn about that pre-trauma self. And for the first time in his life, he could look in the mirror and say, oh, so this is not me. There was a clip put into me. There was a trauma that broke me. And now my whole life was affected by it. And I thought it was me. Suddenly it's not me. I have to deal with it. But what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with alien contamination. A perpetrator that literally stuck poison into me. Bon nachash al chava. The nachash The Nachash had intimacy with Chava, and from that day, Chava thinks she needs the snake for love. Why is he going away from his wife? He's looking for love somewhere. Somehow that's where he gets love. Fake, counterfeit love instead of a relationship in his house. Where did that come from? So for the first time in his life, he has hope to fight his Yetzer Hara. He understands where his Yetzer Hara comes from. His Yetzer Hara is not just some magician who flew down from heaven and is destroying him, and suddenly he has control, he has agency. So what does a Yetzer Hara mean? What does a Yetzer Hara mean? That's what a Yetzer Hara is. You get my point? This doesn't make shortcuts for people. This gives hope to people. This allows people to have bchira. Wow, there's another me. It's amazing. He's a new person today. Imagine if he would have gotten that email from that guy. Oh, trauma, 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 trauma. It's a Yetzer Hara, you idiot. Well, 45 years he couldn't deal with it. When we're superficial, when you don't understand what's happening with people, you understand everything gets so misconstrued. People have to feel what's happening. They have to feel what's happening in themselves. They have to understand. What does it mean, a Yetzer Hara? The worst thing to say about a Yetzer Hara is that that's essentially who you are. Suddenly now, you know what happened with his Yetzer Hara? His Yetzer Hara is almost gone. You know why? Because he realized that Yetzer Hara came in from somebody else. And it has nothing to do with him. And he's disentangling himself like this. Boom. His marriage was saved. His life was saved. His kids were saved. His future was saved.
Yehuda and Tamar also, because we were talking about it before. Yehuda was traumatized. And when he went to the Zona, that was part of his scheme.
Okay. I mean, he doesn't put it that way, but if you want to put it in psychological terms, at least the way it relates to us, you could do that. It's hard for me to talk about Yehuda and Tamar because you're talking about people with very, very lofty souls, but I'll apply the story to ourselves. It's a little easier. Because every story exists on so many different levels, you know? Yehuda sold Yosef into slavery. He saw what it did to his father. He wasn't a careless person. How do we know he wasn't a careless person? Because we could see later what he does for Binyamin, how he sacrifices himself. He had leadership in him. There was a deep soul there. And Yehuda is the Zayda of David HaMelech and Shloimeh and Mashiach. You're talking about Melech Shebeshvatim. And Bechlal, Yaakov's children were, they had the genes of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, or Leah. You know, you're talking about holy genes, as they say. Ha'avas Heinei Namerkava, Shifte Yutke. But it says, Vayerid Yehuda me'es Achav. Yehuda left, he descended. And Chazal say, they dethroned him, they got rid of him. They demoted him. They said, it's all your fault. You destroyed the family single-handedly because you were a leader. You could have said, let's bring Yosef back to Tati. So imagine what Yehuda went through. He went through a lot. Huh? And what did he do? He went to a friend, Chira, and he found a woman, at Bas Shua, Knani, and he married her. You know, there's a word from the Kotzker Rebbe in Siach Sarfei Kodesh. You know what he said? He said, what? It's a real Kotzker Rebbe word. He said, Yehuda lost everything at that moment. He realized his whole life was a mistake. He was a zealot, and he was a kanoi, and you have to sell Yosef, right? He had it all figured out. And suddenly he saw that he destroyed everything. Yakov was in mourning, the Shechina was gone, the family was gone. What do you do? So the Kotzker Rebbe says he realized he has to start over from scratch. What's the first mitzvah in the Torah? Pru. So he said, I'm starting all over again, like a convert. I'm starting all over again, all from scratch. Go back to Bereshis. I don't know anything. Pru is the first mitzvah. So he decided, but you understand the word. It's a powerful word. That's what made him a special person. The ability to say, control, alt, delete. I know nothing about Judaism. I know nothing about life. I know nothing about relationships. Okay? I'm Rabbi Akiva, 40 years old, teach me Aleph Bais. I know nothing. That's when you can learn something. Clean slate. Huh? No, I'm saying he got married. So he's suggesting he got married first, and then he lost a son, and he lost another son. What do you think that all did to him? He lost 2 boys, right? It all brought him back to what happened with Yosef. And in 22 years, he was a transformed man. So the story with Tamar is obviously part of this whole process. Now, if you want to apply it to our lives, when people go through such experiences, they often run to znus. This is how I'm applying it to our lives. They run to znus to deal with it. Because remember, znus, pornography, all these things are very powerful escapes that avoid confronting pain. And you blame it on the Yetzer Hara. And it is a Yetzer Hara. But this Yetzer Hara has context. This Yetzer Hara wasn't born in a vacuum. This Yetzer Hara was given to you. And therefore, you can give it back. Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach. He gave it to me, take it back. Take it back, here. Take your trauma back. Ata mevin. There's a word from the Ishbitzer. Ameretche and the Mehashiloyach, the Heilige Ishbitzer writes. It says right after the story with Lot and his daughters. So it says, Vayis Avram HaNegba, Avram went south, Dorim. In Zohar it says that Dorim south is Midas HaChesed, that's why it's warm, it's Ava. So he says over there, when Avram saw where love can go between Lot and his daughters, he said, we have to start over again with love. You have to redo it. When he saw how corrupt it can become. Okay, so now let's go back here inside. He's now going to quote the Zohar again, but this time with the explanations. So, Ban Nachash, the line starts, Asher Shala Ta'adam Ba'adam, V'husaid Maiman Azal, Ban Nachash Al Chava. The Nachash came to Chava, had intimacy with Chava. It's such a rich explanation in this Maimon Chazal. We all grew up with this idea, that the Nachash had relations with Chava. What in the world is that supposed to mean? Does it mean physical? But the truth is, the physical is not so important. It's the emotional. Because intimacy means you become part of it. Once something is intimate with something else, you can't just erase it. You can't erase it. Right? That's why real people who really work on themselves, they are so careful what goes into their mouth. They are so careful what they see. When you grow up sometimes, you learn halacha, you learn musar. If you don't understand the soul of it, it just sounds like repressive. Don't go here, don't go there, you can't do this, you can't see this, you can't, like Shmir Seinayim, all the organizations, Shmir Seinayim, watch your eyes. Do me a favor, stop telling me to watch my eyes, okay, my eyes are fine. When you see it from an external perspective, it seems very limiting. When you see it from a much deeper perspective, it's not about what you can't do. It's about protecting your integrity. It's about protecting your energy. Your energy is people's energies are serious. Your soul is a very serious thing. It needs to be protected. Right? The food we eat and the people we speak to and the types of conversations we have. Because everything goes in. Now, some things go in very deep. That's what intimacy is. Bon nachash. Once the nachash got into Chava, now for the rest of history, we don't know who's Chava and who's the snake. That's what we're busy with. The deepest form of impact is the bia, intimacy. That's why bia sasuris, relationships in halacha that are forbidden, intimate relationships, arayas, are so serious. Right? There's death penalties. In the modern world, it's very hard to understand. An Eishes Ish, if she's married, she went to an, okay. It's not good for the marriage, I understand. But in halacha, it's like a chiyuv misa, right? Relationships with an animal, relationships with family members, incest, v'chuli, Parshas Acharei Moshe Kedoshim. You could look up the list. Rambam Hilchos Isurei Bia. But death penalties. I understand if I killed somebody, fine. I murdered somebody. But Gilui Arayas, okay, so you had a little fun with the wrong person. Right? But the Torah doesn't see it that way. Now, I know today all the chiyuvi misa don't apply because it's not so easy to get killed. You have to have edim, and you have to have asra, and you have to do it within a few seconds from the warning, and then it has to be b'mezid, and you have to repeat back what you know, and if there's even a doubt of a doubt of a doubt, the person is not... Even when the Torah says chiyuv misa, it's not like everybody was being killed every Monday and Thursday. Huh? Oh. Not only that, the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, right, there's a shitta that a Sanhedrin that kills once in 70 years, they're called terrorists. Chavlonin. Because they always had to find a loophole. It was not easy to get chiyuv misa in Torah. Even Malchus wasn't easy to get. You know, if a person, they put him down to get lashes, right? And he starts going to the bathroom, it's over because he embarrassed himself, that's it. So like, and if there's a doubt, if you knew exactly, and if they investigate, they make the edus meshuga, if they make a mistake. Right. One of the Tanoim writes over there in the Mishnah that if he would have been in the Sanhedrin, nobody would have ever been killed. So I think Reb Shimon ben Gamliel told them, the place would have been filled with murderers. But the point is, it wasn't easy. But chiyuv misa means something else. Chiyuv misa means there's a death inside of me. There's a death inside of me. Because intimate relations, for a soul, it's very, very serious. But for this, you have to take yourself seriously. We live in a culture, we don't take our soul seriously. We survive. You eat here, you go there. If you take your soul seriously, boundaries are not just luxury. They're crucial. And the more sensitive you are, the more sensitive you have to be to boundaries. The fact that I allow toxicity to come into my life is not because I'm a free spirit. It's because I don't know who I am. I don't respect myself. Or I don't know what's going on. So Bon Nachash al Chava is a very, very profound experience. You have to understand what that means. Because till today, I'm still trying to figure out who's Chava and who's the snake, and I don't know. And that's what Eitz Hadas is. It's filled with good, and it's filled with bad, and it's one big cholent, and go figure out one from another. That's the taruvus. And the disentanglement of it in every person's life is a very critical moment of sobriety, and of maturity, and of spiritual growth. Does everybody understand, relate to what I'm talking about? Huh? Or this is too abstract? This is real stuff. This is not superstition. Energy is real. The soul is real. The holiness is real, and impurity is also real. And it plays with brains. It plays with brains. It's poison that goes in. If you're a sensitive neshama and you're sitting at a Shabbos table and they're speaking Lashon Hara for 2 hours, right? You'll go home. There's going to be a certain internal look, like a certain part of the soul like feels dead. There's a reason for it. It's not a joke. It's not some halachi. You're not allowed to listen to Lashon Hara because we don't like juicy conversations. You think God cares if you have a juicy conversation? Well, so you had a juicy conversation, big deal. It was a nice Shabbos table. It was juicy. We decided to take this guy as the target and analyze him. And Baruch Hashem, Lashon Hara was flowing. We took out all the Google files on him. And Jews are even better than Google because we have it from before the Second World War still. Google only started a few years ago. We have files from before the Eitz Hadas, so we can really cut everybody down. But the truth is, where you're going, your soul is going. You're getting entangled with things. You're higher than it. Food, fat doesn't. I was a young bacher once. It's a memory that I still have. It was once a farbrengen by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It was in the summer, so the shul was pretty empty because people go away to the country, so it was pretty empty. So small oilam. So the Rebbe was talking about Jews who feel that they have to read it used to be Jews felt they have to read the New York Times every day. Today, with their hatred to Israel, a lot of people sobered up from the addiction of reading the New York Times. The New York Times was like the paper of record. If you didn't read the New York Times, it was a question on your humanity. It's like not having sushi at a bar mitzvah or not a wedding. It's a shaila on the kedushin. So today it's sushi, but the New York Times was like. So the Rebbe was describing that you have a yid with a payas and a bird and a yamelke, and he's sitting in the morning faran davening, and he's reading the New York Times. And he said his anicle, remember he said his anicle comes and he sees. So he turns it, he takes the New York Times, it's paper, so he turns it into a plane or a boat. You remember kids would make, before tablets and the phones, kids would actually play with other things. You remember? They would climb trees, they would bike, they would go outside, they would count the stars. So today there's already a game for it, so you don't have to do it. So he says the kid takes the newspaper and turns it into a boat, turns it into something else. And the grandfather gets upset because he wants to read the article. So he said in Yiddish, he said, the kind tut mit the New York Times, was medaftan mit the New York Times. And he said, as dein Zayde, your Zayde, he's talking to this person, it was enough of a so as dein, if your Zayde would come in and see what you're doing, that you're reading the New York Times in the morning before davening, volte geschrien, and he gave a scream, the whole, Feh! Volte geschrien, Feh! Rabbi usually didn't scream like that. It was like, I still remember the feh. What's feh? What does feh mean? Feh is not an argument. I'm not arguing with you. It's feh. How does this come to you? How does this come to you? So every person needs to know this. What is the feh in my life? And it's not repressive. It's not because you're going to get punished. It's not about punishment. Schar Aveda Aveda. The worst thing about an Aveda is not the punishment, it's the Aveda. The worst thing about betraying your soul is not punishment, it's betrayal. Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah. The best thing about a mitzvah is not the reward, it's the mitzvah. And before the Baal Shem Tov, they said, you do a mitzvah, you get Gan Eden. The Baal Shem Tov said, you do a mitzvah, das is Gan Eden. After that, it's already, all extra credit. So the Bon Nachash al Chava is a very fundamental thing. So now he continues, Ach loy biyisoida mamash chas v'shalom. But when the Nachash goes in, it never touches the Yisoid. In Kabbalah you have Yisoid and Malchus. Yisoid is the bris, and Malchus is femininity. Malchus is the moon, and Yisoid is the mashpia. The sun gives to the moon. Yisoid is Ois Bris Kodesh. That's the part of the body through which we connect. It's the bris. All the souls come from Yisoid. But then Yisoid has to connect to Malchus. And then they become impregnated in Malchus. Malchus is the moon. When the moon gets diminished and blemished, so the souls that come out then from Malchus, those souls experience the brokenness of life. That's what Rashbi teaches. So the way the souls are in Yisoid, they're never affected. The Bon Nachash is only the way the soul is coming out, but the core of the soul is not affected. Ki kvoidi la'acher loy etinksiv. The pasuk in Yeshaya. Hashem says, my covet, my glory, I won't ever give away to anybody else. What does this mean? Moidedik. And klippe cannot get kvoidi. Kvoidi la'acher loy etin. The Ein Sof says, I will allow myself to be manipulated, but only my external reality. Kvoidi, my ultimate covet, la'achel lo yete. Nobody is getting that throne. In other words, Klippe could come, and the Nachash could go and go and go and go. But at some point, even Haman, he couldn't get the crown of the king. Kvoidi la'achel lo yete. There's a certain thing you say, at kan. Ki b'shem kotshech anishbate lo yishalayich b'nei lo ilam vod. Like we say in the Haftarah blessings. Al kisoy lo yeshiv zar. Atkan. On the throne, nobody else is going to sit. The rats will come around and they'll schlep, and they're parasites. They're narcissistic parasites. Because Klip is always narcissistic. It has no patience to give. It has no energy to give. It just takes and takes and takes. Narcissism is the definition of Klippa. So it takes, but kvoidi la'achel lo yete. Atkan. You're not going to get the core. You're not going to get the pnimis. Ela mebchinas shmois shemes elikim de kedusha shenechlalim biyisoida. Klippa does nurture part of the name of Elikim, which is the name of Tzimtzum, of concealment, which are included in the Yisoid, Midas HaYisoid, Bais Chaim Daf Tzadik Tesamid Aleph. That's from the Arizal. Al Pasuk Achlo Mocha Sapia Mishle Perik Lamed. Where he describes a Zoina, and he says she eats and then wipes out her mouth. So the Arizal explains a whole in Al Piruchnis what that means, how she eats from Gedusha and then wipes off her mouth. And Mavur, it's like Al Pi Maimen Azar Parshas Chukas. Tov hu dalid v'nun mischabrim kechada ein sham. A tov is a dalid and a nun that come together. Shayinika, so he explains this whole in at length on this statement of the Zoyar. Shayinika hazoisu kedei lahavidam acher kach. But even this nurture that they get is only to destroy them. You give them the food just to be able to destroy them. So they're allowed to come in and feed off you, like again, the metaphor of the war. You give them a foot in, you let your pawn be killed, you give them a foot into your territory, just to destroy them. That's the deeper meaning. Hashem pays to the enemies. He gives them payment, he gives them compensation in front of his face. Meaning, you're giving them. Why are you giving them? It's the only way you can really uproot them. If not, I couldn't uproot them. Like we keep on talking about, the only one who can really smell the scent of the animal, the dog, the bloodhound dog that can smell the scent you want it has experience with that smell because that's how you trained it. So the neshama that has experience with this klippa can destroy it. But till the moment of destruction, they do nurture. And therefore they can blemish the flow of kedusha that comes from the name of Elikim. Hamakablim, who receive miyisoid, the nukva from the yisoid, the masculine, the bris, that connects to the nukva in that relationship. There could be some nurture, Ukedain, and this is what the Zohar says, then kol inu nishmas and the nafkin, all the souls that come out at that moment, when the klippa is nurturing from that flow, shanashamis nimshachim gamkin mi yisoid nukva shem sham beibur, the souls are pregnant in yisoid of nukva. Yisoid of nukva is the relationship between the masculine and feminine, where there is conception, and that's when the souls are conceived. The kanal befinish bekur to the legav. Like we spoke earlier from the Zohar that all the neshamas begin as the divine inner treasure. In Yisoid, even though they're all pure and they're all holy. Because in the pnimius of the soul, no alien touch reached. Never think that the core of the soul was affected. So they remain pure, but hoyil v'nafku b'pgimu. The quote from the Zohar. Since they came out in the blemish pirush. Shenim shechu min ha-malchus b'shah shehi b'guma. They came out of Malchus when she was blemished, v'achitzonim yoinkim. And that's the time that the chitzonim, the externals, are receiving their nurture. V'hutzar gadol kanal, and this is very painful. He's acknowledging here the pain. It's very painful. It's painful because tumah is painful. It's not love. It's not pure. And for the soul, anything that's not pure is pain. It's destructive. As I gam heim b'chol inu nasar demoti inu nishmasin kulu izbiru v'ispegimu b'kama tzadin b'kama ka'evin machmas shachitzoinim yoin kemem. Wherever these souls end up, there is pain and anguish. Why? Because the externals have come in, they creeped in, and they're getting your energy. And the soul feels it. So I want you to understand, what is he saying? All the anxiety that we're having, crazy anxiety, what is it really? There's a clip of feeding off my consciousness, my brain. And part of me is there. Part of me is feeding it. Doesn't belong to me, but it's inside of me. It takes me away. The soul is pure. The soul is love. The soul is serenity. The soul is tranquility. Soul is aligned with the source. But the chitzonim come in and they're depleted, and the soul feels it. It's literally eating up my energy, and the disentanglement is not a simple process. That's the tsar. The process is sometimes in my brain of disentanglement. Let's see. V'zeu tsar v'ke'ev otzum lahem. And this is a very painful process. It's an emotionally and mental painful process. Think about mental illness, That's this process in the most dramatic, accentuated fashion. The moon is Malchus. We'll see in a moment. V'amar, and he says, B'chol inu nasar, wherever they are, Ritzaynei loymar, ba'oidim l'mayla, b'derech hamshachasvim midas malchusi yizbarach lislabish beguf. The souls go through a whole journey. From Hashem's Malchus, they flow down until they come into a body. Shenamshachim derech kol ha'echal is the b'ri yitzir asiyah. It starts with Malchus of Atzilus. That's like the pregnancy. And then the soul travels through. That's why it takes 9 months. 9 months for the soul to come down all the way until it can come into the body. So there's a whole journey of the soul through all the worlds and chambers of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. B'chol heichel shaboyim yeshlam kama tzarin v'kama kevin v'isbiru v'ispegimu mesiba anal. And any chamber they go into, they experience this pain because the moon is being blemished. The Shechina is going through this process, and these souls represent the Shechina, and the Klippa is feeding off it. Remember, the Malchus goes in to the war zone, and Malchus often gives up territory and has casualties. There's a special love that Hashem has for them, a special rotzen. Machmas pnimiyis rotzen Hashem v'cheftzei b'molchama zuim achitzoinim lohoitzi yoker mizoilo. Here he says it. These are the souls that are enduring this pain, fulfilling the ultimate desire and plan of creation, where Hashem wanted this war with the externals to take out yoker, to take out all the preciousness from zoilo, from the places that are the degenerate and filthy. And who are the souls that undertake this mission? These souls. Other souls never undertook this mission. So these are the souls that, so to speak, signed up and were chosen for a mission. What do they call it? Mission impossible. This is mission impossible. The only reasons these souls were chosen is because of their strength. So you look at yourself and you say, I'm so weak, I don't want to live, I'm so depleted. What's the real truth? That's the Klippa talking. The Klippa doesn't want you to live. The Klippa wants you to be depleted. The Klippa wants you to say, I'm depressed. The Klippa wants you to say, I want to end my life. Of course that's what it wants you. As long as you could say, I want to end my life, the Klippa continues to live. If you're in a lowly, bad, worthless state, so my Klippa will live and get all the oxygen because I need it, because that's the only thing I have. And today it's going to numb me this way, tomorrow it's going to numb me this way. The moment I say, Lo yamus ki yechya, v'asapa ma'aseka, I won't die, I'm going to live. Of course I want to live. You want to live. Which soul doesn't want to live? Of course you want to live. This monster inside of you decided you don't want to live, because that's how he feeds off you. If you're a shmata, if you're a worthless shmata, I could feed off you. You're like a carcass. I saw on one of the blocks there was a bird that died and all the vultures came. And I was watching the vultures eating and it's like, you see how it works. As long as you're a carcass, you're a dead nevela, everybody comes to eat from you. Why do I want you alive? The moment you're alive, nobody can eat from you. You realize that, yeah? When people are alive, nobody can feed off them. When people are dead, you become a nevela, everybody comes to eat. And realize they're all there right away, you understand? They come right away. They smell, you got to give them credit. They smell carcasses like nobody else. I don't know how. They don't give you 2 seconds. The carcass is dead. Boom! They're here faster than the Chaver Kadisha. Well, it begins with awareness, but the issue is that the nervous system is sometimes shot and the emotional experience is shot. But it begins with this awareness. So these souls were chosen for a crazy, crazy mission. But he says the relationship they have with Hashem is unbelievable because they're the ones who are fulfilling the Pnimius Ratzon Hashem to win the war. They're on the front lines. They're the foot soldiers. They're not sitting, in the Pentagon's offices with maps. They're in the front lines. They get all the treasures. There's people on the front lines. Emotionally, these are the people on the front lines. And that's what we have to remember, that everyone who went through these types of experiences, who's going through these types of experiences, it's not a punishment, it's a mission. And the moment you identify it as a mission, meaning, I am beyond this, I'm not dirty, I'm not filthy, I was sent on a mission. This is not who I am. I was sent here. You're already a different person. You're a completely different person. This is the source of all cleansing and healing. So Hashem celebrates these souls. Can you celebrate yourself like God celebrates you? How could I? The klippa takes over. I don't celebrate myself. I'm busy blaming myself. Raza de Miller, the Zohar continues, the secret of this is, Sharyan kegavna de la'ela. These souls are a mirror of above, of Hashem. Guf ispigim v'loy nishmasa. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says in Zohar, the body could be blemished, not the soul. Meaning, pirush. K'moy shebemalchus abgam rak mibchinas alavushim avaloi b'pnimiyusam chas v'sholem. K'moy kenayin nika shemehem urak b'chitziniyosim b'vado b'pnimiyusam kula dachin kula kaddish. Just like a malchus. Malchus can't really be blemished. The garments can be blemished, but not the core. So the nurture that the klippas get from malchus is only the external element. So the nurture they get from these souls is only from the external layer, never from the core. The core of the soul remains pure. Dachyan is pure. Kaddishin is holy, untarnished, unscathed, untethered. That's the word, the untethered nature of the soul. Klippa wants you to be tethered. Weißt du, was tethered is? Geknippt und gebunden und verhackt und verwundet und verjavet. Entangled with hundreds of knots. Untethered means it's pure. This is me, this is not me. Maybe you're near me, but you're not me. Maybe you're even inside of me, but you're not me. The problem is when you're inside of me, how do I know what's me, what's not me? That's the Nachash and Chava. That's the story. Ba Nachash al Chava. Taruv is Toivera. To be able to identify these things inside yourself. So much self-awareness you need for this, huh? You need a lot of self-awareness for this. You told me that he has a hard time learning this chassidus because it speaks everything about Ein Sof, Ein Sof, Ein Sof. He needs to hear about himself. I told him, you really don't understand anything you're reading. You really don't understand anything you're reading. If this is not about yourself, what is about yourself? He says, it's all about Hashem. I want to hear about me, not about Hashem. You see how you can read words and completely lose. That's an intelligent person, Gad, a very intelligent person. Completely didn't understand the message.
That's the biggest trauma the generation has.
That what? It's all about God, not about me. Right. Yeah, right. That's Bon Nachash. Bon Nachash al Chava. There's two separate entities. There's me and there's God. That's Klippa. That's Klippa. And therefore, we come now back to the Kohen, Bevoyim Loilam Haza. What do these souls look like when they finally land? So here we come to a very, very powerful moment. And I'm going to say this, it has to be said with tremendous sensitivity and tremendous empathy. Because if not, it can come across so cruel, but it's the opposite of cruelty. We always look at it, I was in the wrong place, in the wrong time, in the wrong family, in the wrong community, in the wrong school, right? I was too good looking or not good looking enough. I was an orphan, I was alone, I was a poor family, a rich family, whatever it is, and I became a victim of XYZ. Trauma capital T, trauma regular T, whatever it is, each one according to their journey. In other words, I see it as an event that happened and ultimately played with my brain and affected my life in this way or that way. But what if it's really the opposite? What if really the perpetrator is just a little victim? He's a little schmat who doesn't know anything. My soul's journey, because of what my soul was chosen for, my soul's journey includes going through this experience and this experience, almost like a soldier in Vietnam or in Normandy or in Korea or in Gaza that was sent. You got to go deal with this terrorist and you got to go deal with this terrorist. You got to go deal with this terrorist. From the soul's perspective, the journey is a completely different journey. We experience the journey from a victim's perspective. I ended up in this person's aggressive clutches. I ended up in this person's monstrous addictions. And it's true, because that's what it feels like. But if I could see it from a bird's eye view, if I could look at my soul pre-birth, if I could see my soul completely unscathed by any of these events and untethered by any of the klippas, it's a whole different experience. It's like Golus HaShechina. It's like the Shechina chose, okay, this is where I'm going now. The guy who did it is a garnished, a shmata, a ferd, an idiot. Ferd is not a compliment. Horses are nice animals. So, a sheretz, a tomedik sheretz, who ended up, he's in the wrong place in the wrong time, Nebuch. He's the guy who Nebuch became the victim of affecting somebody so deeply. That's the whole nakuda here. If I can go back and redefine those events, he's the Nebuch case who had to be a shliach for such pain. I signed up for a journey. I was chosen for this. It wasn't b'diavad, it was l'chatchila. The soldier was not being punished. The soldier is sent to weed out terrorists and monsters and murderers and get rid of the blood and the violence. The soldiers that were sent across the Atlantic Ocean from America or over the canal from Britain or wherever to fight Hitler, they weren't punished. They knew they're cleansing the free world from the greatest tyrant in history, Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shemai. And they faced challenges that are unfathomable. But what was that about? I'm not a victim of his challenge. I'm the winning team. I'm the messenger of hope. When you can reframe that, that's the journey from the neshama's perspective. Now the neshama always knew this, but because the klippe goes in, because the neshama allows itself to give, as we're explaining in this whole maimer, so my brain gets affected by the klippe's perspective, and suddenly I think I'm the victim. You're not, you never were, you never will be. The moment your nervous system can feel this, and your body can feel this, and your brain can feel this, you have geula.
You're not able to do this.
Exhale, exhale, exhale. Alavai, you could do it b'shas ma'aseh. When I'm 5 years old, I can't do it. The soul does it. The soul knows this, but the way it's processed, it's just like the moon. The moon is processed as being diminished, but it's not. That's rebirth. That's Rosh Chodesh. That's why we're so in love with the process of the moon. We say, Sheheim asidim li'ischadesh kamoisa. We're all going to be renewed like the moon. V'la teres, what does it say? Beautiful words. Of course, that's why all the nusach of Kiddush Levana. It's strange things. Well, suddenly we talk about our enemies. What do you want from the moon? The moon is a nice guy doing his thing. Yeah? Kashem shani roiket kenegdech v'eni yachal lingoya bach kach lo yuchlu kol oivan tipla leim mosav afach. It's almost like a funny thing. We're out here outside, we're enjoying the moon, we're blessing God and thanking Hashem for the beautiful moon. Gewaldig! Suddenly, boom, we're busy with enemies. Nobody should be able to touch me just like I can't touch you. What's the connection? I can't touch you and therefore they shouldn't be able to touch me. What's the connection? I can't touch you because you're too far for me to touch you. When they went on the moon in 1969, so there was a big, somebody said you have to change the siddur. Because it says, "Kashem sheni yachal bach," I can't touch you. But Armstrong went and touched the moon and planted an American flag and said, one small step for man, a giant step for mankind. He touched the moon. So they wanted to change the siddur. There was a kid in a particular Monsey, not far from a Chassidish place, and he asked his teacher, he was 9 years old, his Kiddush Levana says, you can't touch the moon. So what does his teacher say? The teacher said it never happened. It was a Hollywood production. It never happened. That was his way of being mechanech this kid. This kid said at that moment, 9 years old, this moment I realized that there's not one thing here that I can believe, and he lost his entire faith in Judaism. Including that teacher. The difference between them and the teacher is the teacher didn't believe it never happened. He knew it happened. He didn't believe it never happened. And then the kid said, so if this is how we're being taught, what can I believe? He literally lost his entire faith. There was then a Fabrengen, and the Rebbe spoke about this question. He said he doesn't understand the question. When you're standing on the ground saying Kiddush Levana, you can't touch it. We're not making a statement that science and technology will never be able to invent a rocket ship that can go to the moon. Who's talking about that? When you're standing outside of Shul and saying Kiddush Levana, you could touch the moon or not touch the moon. That's it. It's not so complicated. But the question is, how does it come in here? But that's the vart. Just like nobody can touch you, the soul is connected to the moon. Just like you could watch the moon, you could watch it be diminished, but nobody can ultimately destroy the moon. You can't even touch the moon. I should be able to appreciate that. I may go through a lot of journeys, but it's a journey. It's a journey through pain. The pain is not a destination. The pain is a journey of transformation. And therefore, at your core, you remain immune. And even that which doesn't remain immune, it's only to be able to defeat it.
What's the advantage of a person who went through this, like basically succeeded, or a person who never went through this?
Every person has a different shlichus. It's not a mitzvah to choose this.
If you have two people, somebody went like
Yeah.
addicted to gambling for 5 years, now he's completely clean, in other words, never.
Sometimes two people get married. They're both sick in different ways. Not their fault. They're both suffering with trauma in different ways. Their souls chose each other because they're the only ones who can really understand each other and heal each other. But because they're both in trauma, so they can't really connect. So their marriage becomes very, very difficult and challenging because their trauma is married, not their souls. But the moment they can identify this process, they can actually remarry each other from a soul perspective. They're going to have the most incredible relationship in the world. Because the only ones who can really understand each other is this husband and wife. But it takes a lot of avodah, and unfortunately some people get divorced before they can do this. Huh? Or die. Or just disconnect. They just disconnect. They're not physically divorced. They're not legally divorced, but they're emotionally divorced. Because listen, it takes a lot of courage. This is a lot of courage. I told you, it's easy for me to sit and give shiurim about it, but the emotional experience of it is very different. When my pain is being triggered, yeah, and I say, oh, but the Maimer said so and so. It's not about that. So he says, "V'lachein bevoyam lo'olam hazeh gufam levad nifgam b'mum aval nishmasim kedosha b'tachlis." Never think that the soul is affected because there's a physical blemish. Just like spiritually, we said only the outer layer can be affected. So the Zohar says, in the soul and the body, only the body is affected, not the neshama. Aval nishmasan kedosha b'tachlis v'zeu tam maspe gamkein le'inyan yisudei ha'adam ba'olam hazeh. And this idea in the Zohar is a sufficient tam, you don't have to go further, to give perspective to pain of people in this world. Ukedas sifrei kadmoi sham bezoy. Ukedas sifrei kadmoi sham bezoy. The Reb Shimon Svirilei kavasayu machmas hayladam bibgimu desiyara shu bechatzi chodesh hasheni. You don't have to associate it with sins. You sinned, this one sinned. There is that concept. But the shitta of the Zohar here, based on Sifrei Kadmoi, earlier Svarim, that Reb Shimon holds like that, Rashbi, is it wasn't something that you did and you're guilty for. It has to do with the very birth. It has to do with your very history, with your journey. The neshama came out already in Atzilus, from Malchus of Atzilus in the time of the blemish. That's a whole different journey. It's not that I did this and I did it and therefore I'm being cleansed because of my Avedas. You have people that go through things, they're the most beautiful people in the world. And their parents are the most beautiful people in the world. You can't always say, you did this Aveda, you did that Aveda. That's why you're going through it. It doesn't work that way. That's what Reb Shimon says. The neshamas came out in a time that's called B'gimu Desiyara, when the moon was experiencing the journey of Malchus through all the difficult worlds. And this is usually the second half of the month. Very interesting. Because the first half of the month, the moon is on a high. The second half of the month, the moon is going down. So spiritually speaking, it's the souls that are born in the second half of the month. You were born in the second half of the month. Gewaldig. He says it doesn't mean on the calendar. It's not like everybody was born the first half of the month, life is Gan Eden. Everybody was born the second half of the month, life is Gehenna. The Tzemach Tzedek says, when the Zohar speaks about the second half of the month, it's talking about the time of birth, L'mayla min HaMalchus. The way Zman, Einstein is not the first one to say time is relative. There's time on many different levels. When you say the second half of the month is the way time is beyond Malchus. It's a different type of B'china. There's different souls that are connected to this Inyan or connected to that level. And therefore, in the future, when the moon is rectified, the Zohar says, they are the ones who ought to celebrate with the joy of the moon. Pirush, when the victory will be revealed. And what does it mean be revealed? The victory happens every day. But when the victory is ultimately revealed, and death will be swallowed up for eternity. When the beautiful sparks that are more beautiful than gold and more precious than diamonds, the sparks that come lifnei meloich melech l'bnei Yisrael from Toyu, they will all be sublimated through Malchus Eishes Chayil. And Malchus will become the crown of her husband, which means femininity will transcend masculinity. It says, La'asid Lavi, the woman will reach a much greater level than the man. Malchus will reach even higher, because Malchus went to war. Today we call the man a mashpia and the woman a makabel. But as you come closer to Mashiach, it's the other way around. The women become the mashpiyim, and the men become the makablim. And that's why today the whole system, right? People still who live in the old system, women are like, the men, they're the one, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's old Bini Yisayda Nitna Be'isha. If the men want to understand something, they have to be makabel from the women. Eishes Chayla Teres Baila. Because La'asid Love, it's going to be mamaj that way. Malchus, the Rizal says, Malchus is going to go up, and it's going to be mashpia to Zoh. The Guf says going to be even higher than Neshama. The light of the moon is going to be like the light of the sun. The Nekeva will transcend the man. Because it's going to be revealed that the moon was never blemished. The moon went on a journey to get out the sparks. That's what you're going to see. It's not that you're going to see that you were a dead man and you came back to life. The whole impurity that you thought was inside of you was not authentic. You just went on a journey to sublimate it. Azai, hanashamas hanal shem chavedim meshutofim ima, shesavlu im atzara malchama bepratus beyoisir atchenivgemu machmas malchamazu. All the souls that are the friends of Malchus, he calls them the chavedim. They're God's friends. And they went with her into the pain of war. And they were blemished because of this war. They had casualties. Remember the metaphor that we go into a war and we're affected by it. V'isbiru bekama kevim beruchnis v'gashmis, and they were broken with many pains, spiritually and physically. Heim yisyachadu ima be'ezoi ched v'pratis, yoysim meklolis yisrael she'sav l'kol kach v'pratis. They will have a unique oneness with the Shekhinah in an absolute individual joy, even more than the rest of the people who did not suffer so specifically. Everyone goes through suffering. But the pratis, this individual form of suffering that you go in really to the trenches, this is unique to these neshamas who joined with the Shekhinah to go through all of this pain. So when the victory happens, their joy and their intimacy is a different type of joy and intimacy. You know, at the Ticker Day parade, when the soldiers come back from war, everybody celebrates. The generals and the commanders, and of course the people and the families, everybody celebrates. But those who went in to the line of fire, and those who took the heat, and those who lost close friends, and those who were affected in so many ways, when finally they can see the purpose of it all, and they emerge from it, and this victory that's achieved, the Dan Notzach, that's the concept of the Geula, Bila Amavis Lanetzach. There's a special celebration for these souls. Not because they want to be different. They're not different, but they experience it differently. The way these souls experience Geula is different than every other soul. It's just I'll give you an example. Let's say a father and a mother raise a child who has a lot of difficulties. And a lot of people help this child throughout the journey. And finally, the child emerges triumphant and healthy emotionally and physically. The child gets married. When the parents come home from that wedding, their feeling of gratitude and ecstasy can't be experienced by anybody else. The way they start sobbing from joy is a different experience. Because for 20 years, for 25 years, for 30 years, they were in the thicket of the pain. There were therapists, and there were teachers, and there were friends, and there were good people, and there were uncles and aunts and bubbas. All a good dimension. But it's a different type of experience. Not because you're trying to get more of the party. You just feel it differently. It's a different experience. Somebody who went through addiction and pain and anxiety and depression and dealt with all these stuff that we're talking about. And they come out on the other side and they celebrate their victory. It's a different experience. Their tears are different. Their laughter is different. Why? Because they were there. And they're the ones who accomplished it. So the Zohar says that all these souls who were chosen for this particular journey through the blemished moon, la'asid lavai, when the nitzachon, when the victory happens, their joy with the Rebbeinu Shalom is all different level. He says it's a chedva, it's a chedva pratis, it's something unique and unparalleled. Why? Because they were there. They know what they went through. They know what they gave up. They know what it was like. And they're grateful in a different way. They're moved, they're touched in a way that others can't be touched. And a foretaste of it, Chaim Zachu, you can taste already before. Because Geula happens on a cosmic level, but it also happens on an individual level every day. It says in Tanya, the Baal Tanya writes, that davening is an opportunity for a Geula pratis. The nikud of davening, real davening, is a Geula pratis, is an individual Geula that happens to a person. Then there's the Geula Klal, is the collective Geula for mankind, for the Geula of consciousness, when the whole world becomes untethered. Whew. Just breathe.
You didn't touch with the shiny yet, right?
I like the fact that you keep on asking about Biddur Sheni. It's a good sign.
It's a good now from this after this moment.
Biddur Sheni is alts menucha, everything menucha.
The second part of the journey is now starting. Once you realize it.
Yeah. The purpose of all this is not to make a person feel how much dirt there is. The whole purpose of this is to get rid of it. Oh, I can only get rid of something if I know what it is, and I know how it affects me, and I know how it threatens me. So if you don't understand this, you can't get rid of it. You understand what I'm saying? If somebody puts on layers and layers of clothes on me. And they're filled with mud and filth and gravel, and I'm wearing them and I'm carrying them wherever I go. The only way I can get rid of them is if I understand what I'm carrying, and therefore I could say, enough, off. That's the point. Yeah.
Chava had all the neshamas.
That's why what happened with Chava and Adam and the snake affects us all.
So what does it mean that there are some souls that are from the moon?
That's what he says. All the souls go through difficult journeys. Being in this world is a difficult journey. But there's the souls that he says come out in the second half of the month during the blemished time of the moon, and those are souls that wherever they go, they experience tremendous pain and brokenness. It's a different journey. And you can't compare. It's not about jealousy. It's not about comparing notes. It's a soul that was chosen and chose to sign up for a different experience. You know, I can't live another person's life. Nobody could live anybody else's life. Loi sachmaid, right? We're born originals. We can't die as copies. If I copy your life, I'm just being a liar to myself. Nobody could copy anybody else. It's not going to work. It's going to come back to bite me. We try to copy people. Oh, I want your house. I want your this. I want your that. It's foolish. It just means you don't respect yourself. You don't know yourself. It's like a squirrel deciding that it wants to be an elephant. You understand? The squirrel doesn't do it, but we do it. I want to be an elephant. Yeshikoyach. In Kedusha also. In Kedusha it could become even more problematic. We learn from people. We want to be inspired by people. I want to emulate certain qualities that I could learn from people, but not copy people, not become somebody else. That's also a klippa. You understand? It's this person's klippa. It takes me over. Now I have to become them. It doesn't work that way. You have to be you. You have to really be you, and because that's the divine light that comes through you. This is the light that comes through. So these souls, this is them. This is their journey. This is what they face. And I can't erase it. I can't say it never happened. I don't deal with it. Of course I deal with it. The question is how I deal with it. Do I deal with it with empathy and with courage and resilience and clarity? Or do I deal with it with despair and a sense of victimhood? Okay, my dearest friends, have a beautiful, beautiful day. No, tomorrow I'm away. I'm going to Spain for a few days for the Olami conference. So I'm flying tonight, Be'ezer Hashem. So I'm not going to be here till next week. So we'll announce the next year. Next week is Shavuos, of course. So Thursday night, which is the first night of Shavuos, we're going to have our regular Shavuos shir, 1 o'clock in the morning. In Tent Gimel for men and for women, with a mechitza, everybody is invited. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, the first night of Shavuos. And the second day of Shavuos, which is Shabbos afternoon, 6:30 p.m., there's going to be also a shir and a lecture in Tent Gimel. That's the second day of Shavuos, Shabbos afternoon, 6:30 p.m., also for men and women and youth. Everybody is invited. And may you have an inspiring and meaningful and authentic day. Loi amos ki echya.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.